I'm James Manarino. This is Mike McClenahan. Our third group member couldn't be here today, Allison Dalton-Smith. And our project is Budapest public transport. Our recommendations are framed around the BKV reducing cost per unit and increasing their revenue. Our first recommendation is to implement congestion pricing and ensure that revenue is allocated towards capital investments. Make sure that the modern, most efficient rolling stock is used on the most heavily used lines and reduce rates of illegal travel. And the first recommendation is more of a city policy, but the BKV and the city are very heavily linked. BKV provides bus, tram, suburban rail, underground metro, and other transport services in Budapest. In 2010, it transported 1.4 billion riders. It was corporatized in 1996 and remains fully owned by the Budapest municipality. The reason BKV is the way it is now is because of this 5-year plan centered around 5 goals. The first entailed BKV selling off some of their profitable operations. They also contracted out their non-core activities, and many of their maintenance operations were set up as subsidiaries. The second focus was to establish a formal relationship between BKV and the Budapest municipality. This required that BKV and the municipality agree to what level the city would subsidize the operations. The next was to decrease subsidies. The next was to improve air quality, but there was no metric or specific goal. The most successful component was to implement a parking control policy, but the service was contracted out. So the city and BKV didn't realize any of the revenue. Many of the subsidies were based on output, not cost efficiency. The goals, for the most part, were devoid of any real metrics, and there was no coordination between the goals and the structure of BKV.
This is important to note Budapest in the national context because it's the capital city. The political atmosphere in Hungary is drifting towards one-party rule and an antagonistic relationship with the EU. That political situation jeopardizes the financial solvency of the entire country, and that trickles down to BKV very directly. They have an unmanageable level of debt nationally. Like many cities, Budapest has recently gone through suburbanization. That's tax base leaving the city. Another important thing to note is car ownership. It's been increasing rapidly. When there's major congestion, BKV service is that much more unreliable. That exacerbates the problem. Also, of course, when people are not riding BKV, revenues go down, unit costs go up, and it's even more difficult to pay for replacing those unreliable assets. Fares have been on the rise, so BKV is in danger of losing customers to fare hikes and to private cars. Every cost of BKV is fixed because whether they have 25% ridership or 100% ridership on a line, that line still runs. But of course, when there are fewer people, the unit cost of each of those lines is higher. To increase revenue, you have to get all the riders to actually pay. Right now, the rate of fare evasion is estimated around 10%. You can also increase revenue per vehicle if you can make the vehicles more reliable. And the FUTAR system, which is a GPS system that should be used to allocate assets.
Fare dodging is a very big problem. If you ride the bus every day, it's actually cheaper just to pay off the guys who check than to buy tickets. The revenue from fines in 2010 was about $32 million. The estimated revenue lost translates to $230 million. Our next mechanism is implementing congestion pricing. In the course of a year, the revenue would be about $60 million. It would increase ridership basically because people would be discouraged from driving their cars.
If you get that $60 million from the direct revenue and then you take advantage of the increased ridership that comes from that congestion pricing, 60 million and 18 million respectively, that basically amounts to the operating loss. And so that's an opportunity to greatly improve the operations of BKV.